You know, there's one word that typically scares the heck out of us. In fact, there's one word that we try to avoid as much as we do the actual activity. That word is conflict. Conflict is something that we typically try to avoid. Now, why do you think that we try to avoid conflict? We avoid conflict because A, it scares us, B, it's something that makes us incredibly uncomfortable, and C, it's something that we view as non-productive. Well, I want to take a new look at conflict. I want to look at conflict as something that is essential, something that is good. That's right, you heard me say it. Something that is good and something that is productive. In fact, I want you, by the end of this time with me, to understand that conflict is not only good, but conflict is necessary in order for us to have a good, productive life. Now, the one thing about conflict is that if you want to have a productive relationship, you need to have conflict. You need to have conflict in order to understand what makes that relationship tick, what makes that relationship work. So let's take a good hard look at conflict. Let's understand how it works, why it works, and what it does for us and the role it plays in our life. Now I want you to think of conflict as, if you will, a bell curve. Conflict has several different points on it. Number one, there's that trigger point. That one thing that triggers our anger, triggers our frustration. Now, we don't initially get upset at that point, but what we do is we heighten our senses. We're aware that conflict is there. We're aware that something is happening. Inevitably, what happens is the escalation point. At escalation, however, something important happens. We make a choice. Sometimes it's a conscious choice, other times it's not. And making that conscious or unconscious choice will direct the conflict either in a positive way or a negative way. And what happens at that point is we decide, are we going to reason with our productive, objective mind, or are we going to reason with our biased, subjective, illogical mind? In other words, are we going to be emotional or are we going to be logical? Which is the best road to take? Well, at that escalation point, we make that choice, ladies and gentlemen. And if we make the choice to go illogical, well, when the conflict hits, we're done. Because at that point, we're arguing on emotion. We're arguing on passion. And while arguing on passion isn't a bad thing, arguing on passion can be a very destructive thing. Because if we're not careful, it paints us into a corner. And when we have conflict that's based on position, as opposed to conflict that's based on interest, then we've got a problem. So what we want to do is we want to allow our reasoning to go with the conflict, allow us to argue and produce the conflict based on interest and based on a logical, objective mind. And at that point, we have the opportunity to build conflict into a productive thing. There's one other thing that I want you to remember when it comes to conflict. You need to make a choice. Is this conflict going to teach me something? Am I going to learn something very specific from this conflict, and am I going to use it in a productive way for myself? If you can take something productive out of a conflict, then every conflict can become good conflict for you. If you choose to not take anything good out of conflict, then conflict becomes, well, same old, another activity that you want to avoid, another activity that you want to run from.